Aiyuk fits the bill for what San Fran wants to do. One, PFF comparing him to Pierre Garçon. We know Garçon's record with Shanahan.
Yes, we're back again.
Hey, let's pump up the volume.
Right here.
As always, if this is your first time listening, please make sure you subscribe on all platforms. Whatever podcast platform you're using, you subscribe there. If you're on YouTube right now watching, go ahead and click subscribe there. For a second year in a row, ASU has put out a couple good wide receivers out of college here, and that didn't stop with Brandon Aiyuk, who was drafted number 25 overall to the San Francisco 49ers. And this one was a little interesting, Johnny, because Aiyuk is such a similar prospect to our guy Deebo Samuel, who was drafted last year by them, but it looks like the Niners are doubling down on this Shanahan system of, look, pound the ball, short screens and crossing routes and end arounds that get the ball in the hands of playmakers. Don't put everything on Jimmy Garoppolo's back to push it down the field. But, I think what they're doing here is really smart, and Aiyuk is a hell of a prospect here, Johnny. Walk us through a little bit of the tape and what you see out of Aiyuk in this landing spot.
I really like Brandon Aiyuk, and I think that it's significant that, the 49ers traded up in order to get Brandon Aiyuk. So they really wanted him, which is concerning for Deebo Samuel owners. But I think that this offense is they want as many guys as possible to fit and fill needs, right? So if a guy goes down, it seems like 49ers seem to be one of those teams that always have like the injury bug. And maybe that's their playing style. They're just the way that their playing scheme forces them to get injured more often. I don't know if that's true or not. It just seems like it is that way with the running backs and the wide receivers.
Yeah.
But as far as Brandon Aiyuk, 6 foot wide receiver, so he is taller than Deebo. 205. He almost had 1,700 receiving yards in college. Last year was his major breakout year. Just shy of 1,200 receiving yards. A lot of people are going to say, well, where was this guy? Like, I haven't heard of this guy before. And to that, I will say the major reason, right, is because last year they did have N'Keal Harry, who was the number 1 wide receiver for ASU at the time. So Brandon Aiyuk didn't really have his time to shine, and this year he got it, right? And you're looking at his 40 speed, 4.50, so he's fast. He fits that mold again in that system. I think that Brandon Aiyuk could have a very similar trajectory to Deebo. And now whether or not Brandon Aiyuk will take over for Deebo year 1, I don't think that necessarily will happen. And if it does, I think it'll be later on in the season, kind of like Deebo. But one thing that I've learned from a lot of these wide receivers that come into the system, and I've done some research with them, right? And a lot of them say, like, it's a complicated scheme. Like, it's very simple in nature, but, like, all the different routes and all the different forms that you can run off of this one basic, play that they run, that's where it gets difficult, right? And rookie wide receivers have a difficulty picking that up. And that's, why Dante Pettis really fell off, was because he was talented, but he couldn't pick up the offense. So it will be interesting to see once Aiyuk kind of comes around and he does learn this offense a little bit more, if he is that, X wide receiver for them that they, is the one that you want in this offense. But for this year, I'm still on the Deebo Samuel bandwagon, at least until Aiyuk can fully pick up this playbook.
Yeah, I think you look at some of the things that you're talking about here, the screen game, the yards after catch. Pro Football Focus, yards after catch per reception, he was number 6 in the nation, and then he was number 8 in the nation in screen yards last year. So you're talking about a really deep draft class. We've already talked about some of these guys that are great at taking screens to the house. Aiyuk fits the bill for what San Fran wants to do. One, PFF comparing him to Pierre Garçon. We know Garçon's record with Shanahan. Like, we know in his deep years, like, that's what they love to do. I think there's a perfect marriage here. And especially in Dynasty, you like picking him up. Maybe Johnny's right. Maybe it takes a year or two for him to really, especially this is a tough system to just kind of come right into it and master. But I do think that Brandon Aiyuk has a bright future. And look, I was happy that I took Deebo off waivers last year, in the middle of the year. So Aiyuk's a name to keep keep your eye on, because you definitely want to be able, maybe if I could keep my eye on
Yeah,
how to
maybe.
spell it, or how to speak here. So I think Aiyuk's definitely a guy worth watching and keeping on your radar, because that offense you're going to want to have a piece of.
Well, I mean, and Pierre Garçon, you touched on that part. That was really interesting too, because Pierre Garçon a few years ago was a monster gem that you got in the 9th or 10th or 11th round of fantasy redrafts, and he really helped you and lead you to a championship. So Pierre Garçon is a great comp, and I think that Brandon Aiyuk definitely has a future in this league and a future on your dynasty or fantasy league.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Whisperers podcast. You can hear more from John and Travis on Google Play, SoundCloud, and iTunes. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at TF Whisperers.